Welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. I'm Anthony Murphy, presenting episode number 146 of Live Irish Myths. This week, we're back talking about our favourite historian, Giraldus Cambrensis, Gerald of Wales, the Norman propagandist and churchman of the late 12th century. And some of the things that he wrote about Ireland, particularly in relation to mythology, which we're exploring this evening. And I think you'll find that very interesting, especially in light of the fact that he basically gives his own shortened rendition of Lebor Gabála, or the Book of Invasions. And we'll see whether it's accurate or not, and whether the rest of his material can stand up against scrutiny. We saw last week how he was a character of intrigue, at the very least. That he appeared to have very embellished accounts of things that happened in Ireland. But anyway, I hope that you find tonight's episode interesting. I'm just double checking that we're live everywhere we're supposed to be. Are we live on the main page? That's the big question. Live on YouTube. Good evening if you're on YouTube. Yes, indeed. Live on the main Mythical Ireland Facebook page and live on the Mythical Ireland community. A word, as always, of thanks to Mythical Ireland patrons who support not just the live streams, but everything that we do here at Mythical Ireland. And the address is, there it is. It's there. Patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. Particular thanks to our newest patrons, who are John Dever and Marianne McElroy. Thank you for your support. In relation to news, there is some good news, and that is that work has begun in earnest on number 2 in the Mythical Ireland monograph series. And the subject of monograph number 2 is Bowe, the goddess of the river Boyne. What I'm hoping to do with the Bowe monograph is to basically bring all the sources about her together and to tell her story in full. There's not that much known about her outside what is said in the Dinshanachas, and I intend, as I say, to draw all the sources together. It'll be very heavily referenced with the footnotes and sources, and of course a bibliography, and will be similar in appearance to monograph number 1, which is Finn and the Salmon of Knowledge, Mythology, Toponymy, and Cosmology. Just to remind you that, as always, the books, all my books are available, apart from Land of the Ever-Living Ones, which is out of print. All my books are available on the Mythical Ireland website in the gallery and shop section. In fact, just will post that in now as a comment underneath the videos here. Anyway, sorry, apologies if you underneath. Yes, you will. So I'll shut myself up. I apologize for that. Hope everybody's keeping safe and well. I've had an interesting day. I've had another blast of hay fever. Very bad day with hay fever today. Thankfully, I'm feeling a bit better now, and the nose has stopped running. So we'll keep the fingers crossed. Had a bad day last week as well. I wonder whether anyone else in Ireland who suffers from hay fever is having a particular challenge at the moment. It's not something that normally leaves me in a state, but I'll tell you, I was very under the weather today. In fact, I had to go to bed for a couple of hours in the afternoon. So there you go. Good evening to everybody who's watching. It's always a great joy to welcome you into the library, into Chi Vorachú, Laurelin Mythosoliachta Éireann, and to say Céad Míle Fáilte to one and all, from no matter where you are, ar fudum down around the world, whether you're in Ireland in some part of this magical land, or whether you're on foreign or distant shores. You're all very welcome this evening. Barbara Barney is in the house. Hello, Barbara. How are you? Steve Martinson is here. Hello, Steve. Welcome along. Sheena Yusuf is here. Hello, Sheena Fáilte. Banachty Daisy Peters is here. And, well, Daisy, the pleasure is always ours. And it's great to see you. Brilliant. Cy B is here. Haven't seen you in a while, Cy. Hope you're keeping well. Keeping the good side out, as the man says. Harry McKee is here. Yes. Is that yes to the hay fever question? Donna Jean Porter says hi. Hello, Donna Jean. Always a pleasure. Lillian Cruz is in the house. Barb Jordan. Hello, Barb. Good to see you. Sue Prenter is here. Evening all. Great start to the week. Well, I hope you agree. I think Cambrensis is interesting. I really do. Tom Byrne is in Limerick and says good evening to the Tua. Trnonawa na Tua Golair. O Ndrohead Aha e Gondelu. Parts of County Louth are in, parts of Drogheda are in County Meath, but I happen to live in the County Louth part. So there you go. Nora Gaffney O'Connor is in the house. Giariv Golair, Fáilte, Nora, August. Okay, I'm not going to try and speak fluent Irish because I don't. How is the sea today on Farraga? Were you in San Ishka? Alan Hoskins is here in Ballina, Kellaloo. Good evening to you, Alan. And we got a mention of you last week. Somebody's in sunny Boston, and that's somebody in the Mythical Ireland community. For some reason, it doesn't show the identity, so I'm going to quickly find out who that is. That is Janet Moran. Hello, Janet. You're very welcome to the live stream. Mandy McGee says it's a dazzling evening where she is. Well, we had a reasonably nice day, but then a very heavy shower occurred in the late afternoon. And so there have been sort of thunderstorms around. Luckily, we've avoided them so far. Good to hear it anyway. Bridget Spalding is in Kilmuckridge in Wexford. Hello, Bridget. Good evening to you. Beautiful name. We're very fond of Bridget on this channel, aren't we? Peter Kennedy says hello from Balbriggan. Peter, we haven't seen you in a while. Trust you are well. Keeping the faith, keeping the good side out. Gary Kyo, who's the full Irish, says, Gia Rich. Great and good Tua. It was a fine day on the sod. Spent Sunday at Tara, re-energized to explore our ancestors more than ever. Brilliant stuff, Gary. I hope you enjoyed Tara. I'm sure there was a good crowd up there. By the way, for those international viewers watching, Ireland has finally emerged fully from a long lockdown. There's now no restrictions on where we can travel in the country, and all non-essential retail opened today, including the bookshops. But don't say anything. That'll be our secret. Susan Long says, hello, Anthony. Fáilte. Susan, good evening to you. Archaeoastronomy Database is in the house. Says, hi, friends. Just made it at the last moment to Asher. Look, you know, you're only here for the announcements and the hellos. There's plenty of time. And you'll have to forgive me. So if I end up having to blow my nose or whatever during the live stream, I do apologize. Roberto Robuero Diaz is... it says, today is our Galician Literature Day. So greetings from Galicia in northwest Spain. Brilliant stuff, Roberto. Good evening to you. A big wave down to our friends in Spain. Ireland and Spain have such a strong affinity through our myths and our history. Deborah Williams says, hello to everyone. So happy to be with you all on this sunny day in Hillsborough, Maryland. Brilliant stuff. Deborah, glad that the sun is shining for you. Ahmed is in the house and says, hello, everyone. Hope all good. Fáilte, Ahmed, you're very welcome along to the live stream. Pardon me, this could be a thing. Apologies. I spoke too soon when I said the nose had stopped running. Amy Barry says, hello. Right back at you. Paul Alburl is on the Alabama Gulf Coast. And very good evening to you, Paul. Good afternoon, I should say. I hope you are in good spirits. Movanwe is in Mid Wales. That's who that is. Evening all from sunny Mid Wales, no less. Brilliant stuff. Glad to hear it. Tom King is in the house. Great to be among friends again. Best hour of the day. Well, Tom, if you haven't seen them, go back up the Mythical Ireland Facebook page or the community page and have a look at the pictures that I was privileged to take of Tom while he was working in his forge during the past week. And after the lockdown restrictions ended, I could finally go and see him. And I can tell you it was a great pleasure. But watch this space, because we'll do more than that, won't we, Tom? Erica Bowe is in the house. Sorry, I'm skipping. Erica Bowe is in the house, says good afternoon. Fáilte, Erica. Conasatatu. Gordon Farrell is in the house. Hello, Gordon. Great to see you. Gordon is in Longford. Elizabeth Redabow is saying hello from the plains of Colorado. Hello, Elizabeth. Great to have you in the house. Peter Woods, who's Office Care 36, says, Anthony, there are some huge rapeseed fields close to you. It's flowering at the minute. I can give some bad... It can give... Actually, yeah, I wondered about that. Yeah, there's a lot of rapeseed this year, isn't there? Yeah, I'd like to fly over them and get some drone footage. But there you go. Darylsahara is in the house. Hello, Doris. Never miss an opportunity. That's what I say. Super, they say you should eat local honey if you're a hay fever sufferer. Helps your system. Yeah, I've heard that. And you know what? You're the second person to say it in the last few days. I should listen to that advice and act on it. So I'll do that. Pagan Tree says, good evening, peoples. Fáilte, Pagan Tree, welcome to the library. Jason McWayne is on the central coast of Oregon. Hello, Jason, and just about good afternoon to you. I think it's just after midday there. This is Desiree, who says, hello, Anthony, and all the two are from rainy Louisiana for the last time, moving to Colorado on Friday. Brilliant. Desiree, well, best of luck to you and all our best wishes with your move. We hope that it turns out to be a wonderful move for you. And we're looking forward to seeing you on the live streams from Colorado, not Louisiana. And hopefully you'll move out of the path of some of those hurricanes. Fingers crossed. I was in, says Nora. It was so lovely in the sea now. A lot warmer. Yeah, I can imagine. Fair play to you for getting in there during the winter. Generality says, hello, Anthony. I discovered this channel last week and I've been watching the videos from the series. Very informative. Well, you're very welcome along to Live Irish Myths and indeed the Mythical Ireland channel. And don't forget, you probably have done, but if you haven't, don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, brilliant. Don't forget to check out the website, mythicalireland.com, and the Facebook pages. Lots and lots of stuff happening. Esther David says, thank you. Hi, Anthony, and everyone from London. Hello, Esther, in the great city of London. Great to have you along. Neil Hughes and Mary are getting cozy with the Fion Jarrog August Tay. For those of you who don't speak Irish, that's red wine for Neil and tea for Mary. Mine, do you like my mug? Sent to me by a wonderful Mythical Ireland supporter and Mythflix viewer and patron recently. And it's very true. Sometimes all you need is a good book and a cup of tea. And a good book or several hundred. So mine is a chamomile tea. That's what I'm having this evening, Neil. I may or may not have a dram of whiskey this evening, purely for medicinal purposes, of course. Hope you feel better, says Barb. Yeah, I'm sure, hopefully. Last week I had a very bad dose of hay fever and a cold and felt miserable. And the next day I woke up and I felt great again. So fingers crossed. Christy Cahy is in Holland, in Michigan, in the USA. Christy, you're very welcome to the live stream. Good evening to you. Good afternoon. Anne McCallum. Oh, Phoenix Aurelius, whose comment is missing. What happened there? Giagi Vagus Banachti Onus Thought Aintaha happened to tune in last time. It happened to tune in just in time for this. Phoenix, you are very welcome along, and it's great to see you. And enjoy yourself. Anne McCallum is saying, sorry to hear you were a bit under the weather today, Anthony. Feel better soon. Greetings from a beautiful, warm, sunny southwestern Ontario. Cheers, Anne. Thank you for your good wishes. And absolutely, Anthony. Tom King. Yes, watch this space. Paul Campbell. It is easy to share this Facebook Live event. Yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Take Paul's advice there. And thanks, Paul. Jackie is also there. I saw Jackie a moment ago. Fascawa Tua August Antone. It's been a wee while, but lovely to be back on a live stream. And it's great to have you back, Jackie. Yes. In fact, there are a few people this evening who have rejoined after a little bit of an absence, but we don't mind because life is life and it gets in the way of things. Ali Rogers is in New Zealand, where it is a clear, crisp morning. Kia ora. Taradale, named after Tara in Ireland. I came to visit County Louth a few years ago. It's beautiful and reminds me of New Zealand. Brilliant stuff, Ali. Very good morning to you. You're in Tuesday morning already, and it's great to have viewers from literally the other side of the world. Fantastic stuff. Yes, Esther, absolutely. The wee tot of whiskey is good for you. That's exactly what I tell myself before I partake in a dram, you know. Whose comment is that? It just says Facebook user. Hi, this fine Eve. I've yet to catch up with last week's. Is that Rose Corraine, I think? Rose, good evening to you and welcome along to the live stream. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter is in the house, and so good to catch you live. Well, look, what makes the live streams is the participation of the Tua around the world, which is brilliant. And there's Cindy Johnson, who's joining us from Sydney, Australia. Good morning to you, Cindy. Good day and welcome. Next week, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I should... Oh, that's a nasty looking cloud. I should say I'm hoping to have a live Irish Myths in Conversation episode on Zoom with the wonderful Dr. Niall Gregory, one of the foremost experts in Ireland on dugout boats. So hopefully... we just have to confirm the details. This night, next week, an hour later than our regular series, we'll be having a chat with Dr. Niall Gregory about the logboats of the Irish rivers and lakes. And nobody, I don't think, knows more than this man. And he is a mine of information and a font of knowledge. And I think you'll enjoy it. What time are we on? Sorry. What's that? Is that 15? It is 50. Yes. Okay. So we're back to talking about our friend this evening, Giraldus Cambrensis, or Gerald of Wales, or as he probably would have become known in Ireland eventually, Welsh Jerry. Yes, probably. If he was working on a building site somewhere, you can imagine that. In Dublin, in modern times, somebody called Gerald of Wales would probably get the moniker Welsh Jerry, So we saw last week, we were discussing, the apparent controversy over his writings and whether there was a truth in them or whether they were fabricated or whether they were part of each. And I think what we sort of tentatively concluded last week was that it would appear that there's certainly a mixture of truth and embellishment in what he wrote. But I suppose we never can tell for sure. Now, I want to very quickly read a comment. Just bear with me for one moment. I think this is interesting. Mark commented on last week's video. Layers. Pardon me. I'll just pause that for a moment. If I can find Mark's. Yes, Mark Rhodes Taylor posted this comment on last week's. Well, he didn't post it on the live stream, on the video on YouTube afterwards. Since I had a question mark over the reliability of Cambrensis' account, I decided to ask Professor Ronald Hutton for his thoughts on the subject. This was his response. So we're very grateful to Mark for doing this and for reaching out to Professor Hutton. Quote, "We do not, alas, have any sources against which to check Giraldus. And so there is actually no way of knowing how accurately he reported things or how reliable was the information from which he worked. As he promiscuously gathered good stories from whomever would tell them to him, the logic is that the factual quality would have been greatly varied. But as said, we cannot know where on the spectrum of veracity to place most. Certainly he had prejudices against the native Welsh and Irish, which would not have disposed him to check or doubt the truth of tales about them. The classic case here is Giraldus's account of the inauguration of a king of Tyrconnell in Donegal, and we read that last week. That was the very bestial tale, which includes bestiality by the new monarch with a mare which was then sacrificed. Given the fervent Christianity of the royal family concerned by the time of Giraldus and the number of monasteries with which it was connected, and the fact that he himself never went anywhere near Tyrconnell, we have serious reason to doubt it, but nor can we disprove it. So the case against is not provable. And I think that's where we are with Giraldus. We are on both sides of the fence. 1 foot saying in the field or in the garden or on the patch of land saying, yes, he seems to have been faithfully accurate. And the other, that's fake and made up. Philomena Breen is in the house. Hello, Philomena. Thanks for joining us. Thomasina. Thanks, Thomasina. And you're very welcome to Live Irish Myths. Movanway says, my granddad was a Gerald, so a Welsh Jerry. Brilliant. Good stuff. Donna Jean Porter, by the way, is telling Desiree she lived in Colorado for 20 years and loved it. Brilliant. Good stuff. Steve Martinson is also wishing you good luck with your move. So we hope that goes well. So anyway, here begins the third part of the history of Ireland. So this is the third part, and this is the part where basically what Cambrensis is doing is he is relating a summary of what we would know as Lebor Gabála, or the Book of Invasions, or correctly called the Book of the Takings of Ireland. And we'll have a look and we'll consider its veracity. But it's interesting because given what Professor Hutton has just said about Cambrensis's habit of talking to anybody who would tell him a story, but what other sources were there in the late 12th century other than the oral sources? You know, long before printing had been invented. And the first, there were manuscripts, but the only people who would have had manuscripts were the monks. The lay people would have told their stories, and by the way, would have related mythology as history. And Lebor Gabála, until the 20th century, was always assumed by most, I would say, of the people who propagated it. The Book of Invasions would have been assumed to have been an accurate historical account of pre-Christian Ireland. Scholars now say, of course, it's entirely pseudo-historical, but there are some truths that ring out of it, as we have seen in previous episodes. And this is section 84, the inhabitants of the country. For the rest, it now seems time to turn our pen to the description of the first inhabitants of this land, and take, one after the other, the arrivals of different people, how they came and from where, how long they stayed in the island, and how they disappeared. We shall try to explain all this as briefly and as clearly as possible. Well, thank you, Giraldus, Welsh Jerry. For a proper order seems to demand that after we have placed the land itself in the ocean and outlined its position and nature, as well as its characteristics from the point of view of the presence or absence of various living things, we should then finally treat of man himself as being the most worthy subject of our investigation, and on whose account we have treated of the other things. We shall give an account of his customs and manners here, and of the various happenings that occurred according to the turns of fortune down to our own times. And that's exactly what the Shanachie of old would have related. As I say, Mark Gordon's in the house. Hello, Mark. They would have related myth as history, and would have probably given a lengthy and embellished and entertaining account of Lebor Gabála and the arrival of Kildare, all the way down to, Tuatha Dé Danann Maleesians and the kings of Tara, all the way down to their present day, and would not have skipped a heartbeat or blinked an eye in relation to its veracity. Going to open the window. There's a blackbird singing merrily outside. I always like to hear that. And this is paragraph or section 85, the first arrival, that namely of Kesara, the granddaughter of Noah before the flood. And we know from our episodes about Lebor Gabála that in fact the first person to arrive in Ireland, according to the traditions encapsulated in Lebor Gabála, was Kildare, the granddaughter of Noah. So he's spot on immediately. According to the most ancient histories of the Irish, Kesara, he spells it Cesara, the granddaughter of Noah, hearing that the flood was about to take place, decided to flee in a boat with her companions to the farthest islands of the west, where no man had yet ever lived. She hoped that the vengeance of the flood would not reach to a place where sin had never been committed. And again, absolutely so far, spot on accurate. That is pretty much a very good summary, a very good paraphrasing of Lebor Gabála so far. All the ships in her company were wrecked. Her ship alone, carrying 3 men and 50 women, survived. Yep, that's exactly right. Well, it's right in terms of, I'm not saying it's historically what happened. I'm saying it's right in terms of matching with what Lebor Gabála tells us. Nuala Doyle is in the house. Hello, Nuala. And Desiree is all excited about the move, and in fact can't wait to go to Colorado. So you'll have to show us the new surroundings when you get there. It put in at the Irish coast by chance 1 year before the flood. All the same, in spite of her cleverness and, for a woman, commendable astuteness in seeking to avoid evil, she did not succeed in putting off the general, not to say universal, disaster. The place where that ship first put in is called the Shore of the Ships, and the place where the aforementioned Kessera is buried is now Kessera's tomb. But since almost all things were destroyed in the flood, one may reasonably have doubts as to the value of the accounts of these arrivals and events that has been handed down after the flood. No mention, unfortunately, about the survivor, Fintan Mac Bóchra, who went to the top of a hill in Tipperary, not far from where Alan Hoskins is located, and called Tulfinge, and survived the flood in the form of a salmon. Later, pardon me, later taking the form of a hawk and an eagle. Let those, however, who first wrote these accounts be responsible. My function is to outline, not to attack such stories. So he's questioning the veracity of them, but as he says, he's not criticizing, he's just recounting them. Excuse me. So perhaps we are going to see Giraldus's reputation redeemed somewhat in these episodes. Perhaps, as in the case of the invention of music before the flood, a narrative of these things had been inscribed on some material, stone or tile, which later was found and preserved. The next section is about the second arrival, that namely of Bartholomeus, or Partholone, he puts it in brackets, 300 years after the flood. In the 300th year after the flood, Bartholomeus, the son of Sarah, of the stock of Japhet, and of course this is the attempt of the ecclesiastical scribes to connect the Irish story with biblical history. The son of Noah is said to have been brought to the coasts of Ireland with his 3 sons and their wives, either by chance or through their own efforts. That is to say, either through losing their way or having had a good idea of their future fatherland. His 3 sons were called Lagninus, Salanus, and Ruturgus. These 3, in leaving traces of their names on certain things still existing, have acquired an immortal memory and, so to speak, a continual and living presence. After the first is named the Lake of Lagellinus. There's a footnote to that, which I'll just quickly check. Is that the Lagan? Is that something to do with the Lagan? No, not identified, although said to be in Emic Ush Bray to the southwest of Tara. And after the second is named the high mountain that overlooks the sea between Ireland and Britain, Salanga. Now, however, this latter is more usually called Dominic's Mountain because St. Dominic built a fine monastery at its foot at a much later time. And again, there's a footnote. Slieve Donard in County Down, the tallest of the mountains of the Moran, and in fact the tallest mountain in Northern Ireland. Because St. Dominic built a fine monastery at its foot in a much later time. Ruturgus, the third in the succession, gave his name to Lake Ruturgus. Those sound like Latin names, they don't sound at all Irish. The inner bay of Dundrum in County Down is where that is. We find few outstanding things done during the time of this Bartholomeus, and indeed almost nothing, except that 4 enormous lakes suddenly burst forth from the bowels of the earth. So this again seems to be a fairly faithful rendition of what's in Lebor Gabála. And in the interests of developing agriculture, 4 huge forests were cut away from the very roots. And so an open plain was made, but not without the sweat of many. I'll bet if this was back in especially, well, we know that forest clearance actually began in the Neolithic. when only stone axes were used to cut the trees down. That was a labour-intensive, sweaty job. Sweat, blood and tears spent on clearing the earth. For at that time, almost the whole land, with the exception of a few scattered mountain districts, was overgrown with vast and ever-multiplying woods. Consequently, there was scarcely any open place where one could ply the plough. Even to this day, the plains here are few in proportion to the woods. Now, this is interesting because in the I'm not for a second just immediately suggesting that Partholon relates to the Mesolithic or the early Neolithic, but we are told by the scholars that Ireland was very, very heavily forested in the Mesolithic in the Middle Stone Age, so before the arrival of farming in around 6,000 years ago. And that, in fact, Ireland was so densely forested at that time that a squirrel could pass from Malin Head on the very northern tip of the island to Mizzen Head on the southern tip, a distance of almost 300 miles, without its feet ever touching the ground. Even to this day, the plains here are few in proportion to the woods. And he was writing, of course, in the late 12th, early 13th century. Ireland has been very extensively cleared of woodland, especially in the last 300 to 400 years, unfortunately. Bartholomeus, however, and his sons and descendants were fortunate not only in their material success, but also in the increase of their stock. For after a cycle of 300 years from their arrival, the number of their descendants is said to have increased to 9,000. At length, having conquered the giants in a great war, and because human prosperity cannot last forever, and because, quote, the gods easily grant great blessings, but do not easily maintain them, unquote, and, quote, the gods have imposed this limit to increasing success, unquote, and, quote, the great come into conflict with one another, unquote, and, quote, to persist for long is denied to the great. Heavy indeed is the fall under a great weight, unquote. And there's a couple of footnotes there. Let's just see where they're pointing us. Lucan, Pharsalia, and these quotations are taken from Lucan, Pharsalia. Okay. He died with nearly all his descendants as a result of a sudden pestilence and, perhaps, the corruption of the air arising from the corpses of the giants that had been killed. Only Ruanus is said to have escaped the disaster. This Ruanus, as the ancient histories recount, survived more cycles of years than could easily be believed, right down to the time of St. Patrick, by whom he had been baptized. He is said to have given to St. Patrick a full account of the history of Ireland and all the deeds of his people, and all the deeds of his people that had almost, because of their great antiquity, escaped the folds of memory. For there is nothing so fixed in the mind that but neglect and the passage of time will make to fade away. This Roanus, although he succeeded in making an armistice with death, nevertheless did not succeed in making a peace. He pushed forward the barrier of his life far beyond the ordinary and accustomed limit of this fleeting and short existence. Nevertheless, he did not escape the fate that falls on mortal flesh. And somebody is saying good evening all on the Mythical Ireland community. Who is that? I can't see, actually. That's this Facebook user. Good evening all. I'm not sure who that is. I do apologize, but good evening and welcome. The third arrival, that namely of Nemedus from Scythia and with his 4 sons. The aforesaid Bartholanus and all his race having been wiped out by the sword of a cruel and long-enduring pestilence. The land remained for some time deprived of anyone to inhabit it, until Nemedus, the son of Agnominius, a Scythian, arrived with his 4 sons at the shore of the abandoned land. His sons were Starvus, must have been hungry. Is it Gerbanales, Aninus, and Fergusius? Talk about unpronounceable. I thought the Irish names were hard. In the time of Nemedus, 4 lakes suddenly and with irresistible force emerged, and this is a theme that is actually quite prevalent in the early stories of Lebor Gabála, and many woods and groves were changed to fields and plains. He also waged 4 fierce wars with pirates that were accustomed to plunder the country. Sounds almost a little bit like the Vikings, doesn't it? He was victorious everywhere. He died, however, in an island in the south of Ireland, to which he left his name as a lasting heritage. His sons and grandsons and great-grandsons multiplied in a short time to such an extent that they filled every corner of the whole island with more inhabitants than it ever had. But since what grows gradually is more solid, and one cannot usually rely on what has sprung up so suddenly, so just as they had increased to such a great number, they were destroyed much more quickly than they had arisen through sudden and unexpected happenings. For most of them were quickly destroyed in the frequent wars that they waged with the giants who then flourished in the island, and through various diseases and plagues. I'm presuming the giants mentioned are the Fomorians. Those that were left seeking refuge in flight from the many evils that threatened them made in their boats, some for Scythia and some for Greece. The race of Nemesis held Ireland for 216 years, and for 200 years afterwards, the land was empty. The fourth arrival, that namely of the 5 brothers and the sons of Della. I should mention that Partholon and his race were killed in a plague, and they're said to be buried at Tala in County Dublin, which is rendered as Tala Muncher Partholon, the graves of the men or the family or the people of Partholon. The fourth arrival, namely that of the 5 brothers and sons of Della. When these things had happened in this order, at length 5 chieftains who were at the same time brothers, the sons of Della, springing forth from the branch of the people of Nemesis, who had taken refuge in Greece, landed in Ireland. So in other words, they're an offshoot of the Nemedians. And these are the Firvolog. They found it uninhabited and divided it in 5 equal portions among themselves. The bounds of these divisions, and by the way, that's very interesting, because the division of Ireland is again into provinces, sometimes into 3, sometimes into 2, sometimes into 5. And my pencil is missing. Crisis. It is a long-running theme in mythology, and it's like a cosmology, you know, this idea of a land having a sacred center and then divisions emanating from that. The bounds of these divisions meet at a certain stone in Meath near the castle of Kildare, Kilair, and that's in brackets Killare. And that's really interesting because last week we had spoken about the Giant's Dance, this mysterious stone circle apparently taken from Ireland to Britain by Merlin from Kildare, but in fact it is now thought by scholars that he meant Kildare, and Kildare is in Westmeath, right next to the hill of Ishnock. This stone is said to be the navel of Ireland, as it were, placed right in the middle of the land. And here we are, here Giraldus is talking about the Isle na Moran, the stone of divisions, which is found at the hill of Ishnock, and is said to be Umbilicus Hiberniae, the navel of Ireland. Consequently, that part of Ireland is called Meath, as being situated in the middle of the island. Meath meaning middle. But Meath does not belong to any one of the 5 well-known divisions of which we have spoken above. These 5 brothers were the first to divide the island into 5 portions. When the aforesaid 5 brothers, namely Gandius, Genandius, Sangandius, Rutherigus, and Slonius, they are very Latinized versions of the names. Like Slonius is Slonia, you know, and there's a footnote. Let me just see if it gives the Irish versions. Yeah, Gan, Genan, Sengan, Ruri, and Slonia. Yeah. Had divided the island into 5 portions. Each portion had a little section in Meath touching upon the stone. The reason was that, as that land was from the beginning best, both by reason of its being a plain and on account of its rich harvests, none of them wished to be left without a share in it. Oh, I do apologise. I'm sorry. The first king of Ireland, Slonius, or Slonia, as time went on, and fortune varied, and, as is her wont, turned many things upside down in a short time. Slonius became the sole king of the whole of Ireland. As a result, he is called the first king of Ireland. He first put the 5 small portions of Meath together, treated it as a unit, and assigned it to the royal demesne. Consequently, Meath, even to this day, remains separate from those other 5 principal portions, which, as has been said, were destroyed by Slonius. It does not contain as much land as any of the other 5, but only half as much. From the time of Slonius, each of the 5 portions contains 32 cantrids, but Meath contains only 16. There are therefore 80 plus 16 cantrids in all. Cantrid is a word used in the normal way in the Irish and British tongues for as much land as usually holds 100 settlements. Since from among these brothers and their descendants 9 kings followed, their reign was short and lasted only about 30 years. Slonius was buried in a hill in Meath, which takes its name from him. So this is all a reasonably good retelling. Movanwe, are we keeping you up, Anthony? Yes, sorry, I do apologize. As I say, I hit the bed in the afternoon for a couple of hours because I was feeling under the weather. And it's even when I start thinking about it, you know. This is very true. The Hill of Slane, which we have spoken about and written about in Island of the Setting Sun, principally, which is literally, I mean, is about 8 or 9 miles to my west here. Drogheda being on one end of the bend of the Boyne and Slane on the other, although the Boyne continues to flow down through Meath into Kildare. Sláine, the story about Slane is that it takes its name from Sláine, the king of the Firvolog, who's said to be buried on the summit of the hill there. And the hill these days is much more famously, its claim to fame. There's a lovely glow coming under this big shower cloud, lovely orange glow. It looks like the sun is setting beneath the cloud. Its claim to fame is as the place where St. Patrick lit the Paschal fire, bringing Christianity to Ireland. But of course, it was important in prehistory. And there is a mound there, said to be a Norman moat, but the Normans often refashioned what was there already and defended it. A castle moat on top of a mound that is, according to the local tradition at least, the burial place of this Firvolog King Sláine. So anyway, full marks to Giraldus so far for fairly faithfully recounting Lebor Gabála. And it's interesting, I wonder, because he doesn't say, but what his sources were for this. Were they ecclesiastical sources, or were they lay sources? Were they ordinary folk? It'd be very interesting to see in the 12th century AD how many people were aware orally of their country's great mythical history. The 5th arrival, that namely of the 4 sons of King Milesius from Spain, and how Herimon and Heberus divided the kingdom between them. These people having been for the most part destroyed and very much weakened, not only because of internal conflicts, but especially on account of a war which they waged with other descendants of Nemedus that had come from Scythia, and from which they had greatly suffered. Eventually 4 noble sons of King Milesius came from Spain in a fleet of 60 ships. They immediately conquered the whole island without any opposition. And this is where, I don't know what his source was here, but of course, very importantly, he has missed the arrival of the Tuatha De Danann. And in fact, the Milesians came to take Ireland from the Tuatha De Danann and met a serious amount of opposition. So this bit, it probably depends on what his source was. But as I say, he's missing the key element of the story, which is that the Milesians did come up against considerable opposition by the Tuatha De Danann and eventually made a treaty or an agreement with them, having negotiated with the tutelary or the guardian goddesses Banba, Fola and Eru. And then when Amergin negotiated an agreement with the 3 De Danann kings, Macul, Macecht and Magrania at the Hill of Tara, in relation to putting out to sea and a distance of 9 waves, and if they could make it to land again, they could have the country. As time went on, the 2 outstanding among them, Heberus and Herimon, divided the kingdom into 2 equal parts between themselves. Herimon got the southern and Herebus the northern part. By the way, the tradition about the Mill Mount in Drogheda, here in Drogheda, which is that mound with the great Martello Tower on it. The tradition about that is that that was built as a marker between the two kingdoms. So the Boyne River would have been at least part of the boundary or the border between the lands, the two sections of the island. Again, we're back to the cosmology of the land being divided into parts, in this case, two parts, north and south. And as I say, certainly the folklore about Millmount is that it was built as a boundary marker between the kingdoms of Eber and Eramon. The discord between the two brothers, and how Heberus having been killed, Heramon was the first king of the Irish people. When they had reigned for some time prosperously and happily together, since shares in a kingdom are not to be relied on, and all power is impatient of being shared, blind ambition, the mother of evils, gradually undermined the agreement of the brothers and quickly dissolved the bond of peace. Discord raised her head where all had been well and succeeded in upsetting and destroying everything. That colour is really lovely. I'd love to be out with the camera. And there had been a number of conflicts and many doubtful issues in wars. Heramon eventually won. His brother Heberus was killed in war, and so the whole kingdom fell to him alone. He was the first king of the Irish people that to this day inhabit the island. And that's very important, because we've spoken about this, how it has long been said, and we're going back all the way to the 12th century here. It has long been said or believed that the modern Irish population was descended from the Milesians. Now, if you take it, as I do, that the Dedanans were related to the people of the Neolithic who built the monuments, and that the Milesians were related to the Bronze Age beaker culture that replaced them, and then there may be indeed some truth to that, because the geneticists tell us the modern Irish population is mostly descended from that beaker arrival. The Hibernienses, according to some, is it Hibernienses, take their name from Heberus, of whom we have been speaking, but others with greater probability say that they take their name from the Spanish river Hiberus, whence they came. They are also called Gaeilge and Scoti. That's the Gaels, Gaelic and Scoti. And of course, we've talked before about how the name of Scotland is actually derived from an early name from the Irish, which is Scoti. As the old histories tell us, a certain Gaeilus, a descendant of Phineas, having, after the episode of the confusion of tongues at the Tower of Nembrotica, I think they're talking here, of course, about the Tower of Babylon, become very skilled in various languages, was, on account of that skill, joined in marriage by King Pharaoh to his daughter Scotia. Since then, the Hibernienses derive, as they say, their line from these two, Gaelius and Scotia. They are called, as they are born, Gaeli and Scoti. This Gaelius, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, because it's a corrupted form. This Gaelus, they say, composed the Irish language, which is called Gaelic, as much to say that it was brought together from all languages, and that is the truth. That is actually the story about the Irish language is supposed to have been a composite of the 72 languages of Babylon. A very interesting story. The northern part of Britain is also called Scotia because it is known to be inhabited by a people which was originally propagated by Gaelius and Scotia. The affinity in language and culture, as well as in weapons and customs, to this day bears out this fact. There you go. So again, and it's lashing rain down, and it's really dark, but there's this tremendous orange glow in the sky out there. How are we all keeping? Jackie Stevenson is in the house. Hello, Jackie. Simon Chute is in the house. Hello, Simon. We were just talking about how Giraldus correctly identified Kildare in a different story about the divisions of Ireland by the Fir saying all the divisions met at a certain stone in Meath near the castle of Kildare. So interesting. Where were we? Because I lost my place. Yes. Groguintius, king of the Britons, who sent the Basclenses to Ireland and gave it to them to settle in. As the British history relates, the king of the Britons, Groguintius, son of the noble Belinus and grandson of the famous Brennius, when returning from Denmark, which his father had formerly conquered, and which, when it had been rebelled, he himself had again brought into subjection, found at the Orkney Islands a fleet which had brought Basclenses there from Spain. I don't know what that word is, Basclenses. Their leaders approached the king and told him whence they had come and the reason for their coming, namely, to settle in a country of the west. They were urgent in their request that he should give them some land to inhabit. Eventually, the king, on the advice of his councillors, gave them the island that is now called Ireland, and which was then either entirely uninhabited or had been settled by him. That would be rather convenient, wouldn't it? He also gave them pilots for their expedition from among his own fleet. From this, it is clear that Ireland can, with some right, be claimed by the kings of Britain. Well, there you go. There is a case of propagandizing for the sake of, for the sake of the British. I think that would be highly disputed, even though the claim be from olden times. Secondly, the city of Bayonne is on the boundary of Gascony and belongs to it. It is also the capital of Basclonia, whence the Hibernianses came, and now Gascony and all Aquitaine rejoices in the same rule as Britain. The twofold claim from recent times, that's a sentence that's just sitting there on its own. The kings of Britain have also a newly established double claim. On the one hand, the spontaneous surrender and protestation of fealty of the Irish chiefs, for everyone is allowed, to renounce his right, and on the other, the favour of the confirmation of the claim by the Pope. For when Jupiter started thundering in the confines of the Western Ocean, the petty Western kings were frightened by the thunder and averted the stroke of the thunderbolt by sheltering from it in a peace. But about these matters, more will be said in the proper place. And there ends Giraldus Cambrensis' account of the invasions of Ireland, a retelling of Lebor Gabála, missing the very, very, very important principal element, in my opinion, the Tuatha De Danann, completely missing it. So one has to wonder what his source was and why the De Dananns were left out and where they came into it. Vicky Wallace-Southall is in the house. Hello, Vicky. And if Evan and Chili are there, good evening to you and welcome. Good afternoon. Also with us is Kathy May Deo. Hello, Kathy May. You're very welcome along to the live stream. The nature, customs, and characteristics of the people. I have thought it not superfluous to say a few things about the nature of this people, both in mind and body, that is to say, of their mental and physical characteristics. To begin with, when they are born, they are not carefully nursed as is usual, for apart from the nourishment with which they are sustained by their hard parents from dying altogether, they are, for the most part, abandoned to nature. One wonders whether there might be some truth in this. And the underbelly of the cloud is now awash with this great orange-yellow glow. It's fantastic. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by what's going on outside. They are not put in cradles or swathed, nor are their tender limbs helped by frequent baths or formed by any useful art. The midwives do not use hot water to raise the nose or to press down the face or lengthen the legs. Unaided nature, according to her own judgment, arranges and disposes without the help of any art the limbs that she has produced. As if to prove what she can do by herself, she continually shapes and molds until she finally forms and finishes them in full strength and beautiful upright bodies and handsome and well-complexioned faces. But although they are fully endowed with natural gifts, their external characteristics of beard and dress and internal cultivation of the mind are so barbarous that they cannot be said to have any culture. They use very little wool in their dress, and that itself nearly always black, because the sheep of that country are black and made up in a barbarous fashion. And here Giraldus is suddenly unleashing his disdain for the dress, the fashion of the Irish. For they wear little hoods, close-fitting and stretched across the shoulders and down to a length of about 18 to 22 inches, and generally sewn together from clothes of various kinds. Under these they wear mantles instead of cloaks. They also use woolen trousers that are at the same time boots, or boots that are at the same time trousers, and these are, for the most part, dyed. When they are riding, they do not use saddles or leggings or spurs. They drive on and guide their horses by means of a stick with a crook at its upper end, which they hold in their hand. They use reins to serve the purpose both of a bridle and a bit. They do not keep the horses accustomed to feeding on the grass from their food. There you go. Moreover, they go naked and unarmed into battle. They regard weapons as a burden, and they think it brave and honourable to fight unarmed. They use, however, 3 types of weapons: short spears, 2 darts, in this they imitate the Basquenses, and big axes, well and carefully forged, which they have taken over from the Norwegians and the Ostmen, about which we shall speak later. They are quicker and more expert than any other people in throwing, when everything else fails, stones as missiles, and such stones do great damage to the enemy in an engagement. Ah, the fighting Irish. They are a wild and inhospitable people. They live on beasts only, and live like beasts. They have not progressed at all from the primitive habits of pastoral living. And here, what we see now is the true colours coming out. The role of the propagandist, writing on behalf of the imperial forces, paints the primitives, paints the inhabitants, the locals, as it were, the indigenous inhabitants, as savages and primitives, and therefore we are going to civilize them and make ourselves look good. While man usually progresses from the woods to the fields, and from the fields to settlements and communities of citizens, this people despises work on the land, has little use for the money-making of towns, condemns the rights and privileges of citizenship, and desires neither to abandon nor lose respect for the life which it has been accustomed to lead in the woods and countryside. He's clearly talking about a particular sort of rural dweller, I think, here, and perhaps overgeneralizing. They use the fields generally as pasture, but pasture in poor condition. Little is cultivated, and even less sown. The fields cultivated are so few because of the neglect of those who should cultivate them. But many of them are naturally very fertile and productive. The wealth of the soil is lost not through the fault of the soil, but because there are no farmers to cultivate even the best land. The fields demand, but there are no hands. How few kinds of fruit-bearing trees are grown here! ! The nature of the soil is not to be blamed, but rather the want of industry on the part of the cultivator. He is too lazy to plant the foreign types of trees that would grow very well here. The different types of minerals, too, with which the hidden veins of the earth are full, are not mined or put to any use, precisely because of the same laziness. Even gold, of which they are very desirous, just like the Spaniards, or which they would like to have in abundance, is brought here by traders that search the ocean for gain. Well, we know to an extent that that's not true, because, you know, there was an enormous production of gold artifacts in late prehistory and in early historic Ireland, and all you have to do is go to the National Museum to see a large number of those. So this would appear to be definitely an act of propaganda here. They do not devote their lives to the processing of flax or wool, or to any kind of merchandise or mechanical art. For given only to leisure and devoted only to laziness, they think that the greatest pleasure is not to work, and the greatest wealth is to enjoy liberty. I'm not sure. Yes, I'm not sure. There certainly was in later times, there would have been English historians who would have said the same about the Irish, that they were lazy and they weren't at all given to punctuality or taking heed of clocks, and they weren't industrious and this, that, and the other. And again, that's always easy to say from the point of view of a colonizing force. It just has to be taken with a very large pinch of salt. Let's think bucket-sized pinch of salt. This people is then a barbarous people. Again, he's painting them in a very, very poor light, and that is part of the role of the colonizer. Literally barbarous, Judged according to modern ideas, they're uncultivated, and not only in the external appearance of their dress, but also in their flowing hair and beards. All their habits are the habits of barbarians. Since conventions are formed from living together in society, and since they are so removed in these distant parts of the ordinary world of men, as if they were in another world altogether and consequently cut off from well-behaved and law-abiding people, they know only of the barbarous habits in which they were born and brought up, and embrace them as another nature. Their natural qualities are excellent, but almost everything acquired is deplorable. So there you go. Paints a pretty damning picture, doesn't he? It is only in the case of musical instruments that I find any commendable diligence in the people. And here he may have been striking again on a grain of truth. Yeah, Brendan Byrne says naked is fine, but he did not take into account the Irish weather. He certainly did not. Chungus, flowing hair, check. Flowing beard, check. Yeah. Heading into battle naked, check. Yeah. So, yes, indeed, Kelly. There's definitely a pattern there, isn't there? He didn't make a huge amount of commentary on the cosmological stuff from Lebor Gabála, but now that he's talking about the people, it's like he's opening he's pointing all the guns and shooting, you know. They seem to me to be incomparably more skilled in these than any other people that I have seen. He's talking about musical instruments. The Irish, of course, have always been a very musical people. The movement is not, as in the British instrument to which we are accustomed, slow and easy, but rather quick and lively, while at the same time the melody is sweet and pleasant. Yes, indeed. And we had the international Fleadh Cheoil na hÉireann here in Drogheda for 2 years running. Sadly, it was to return to Mullingar, which was where it was first held last year, but coronavirus got in the way. So hopefully Marty Mulligan and all the people who live out in Mullingar there will get their chance to welcome the Fleadh Cheoil again soon. It is remarkable how, in spite of the great speed of the fingers, the musical proportion is maintained. The melody is kept perfect and full with unimpaired art through everything, through quivering measures and the involved use of several instruments, with a rapidity that charms, a rhythmic pattern that is varied, and a concord achieved through elements discordant. They harmonize at intervals of the octave and the fifth, and they always begin with B flat and with B flat end, so that everything may be rounded with the sweetness of charming sonority. Wow, he's fairly lavish in his praise of Irish musicality, isn't he? Given that he's absolutely damned us as barbarians and savages in the previous account. They glide so subtly from one mode to another, and the grace notes so freely sport with such abandon and bewitching charm around the steady tone of the heavier sound, that the perfection of their art seems to lie in their concealing it, as if it were the better for being hidden, and art revealed brings shame. Hence it happens that the very things that afford unspeakable delight to the minds of those who have a fine perception and can penetrate carefully to the secrets of the art, bore rather than delight those who have no such perception, who look without seeing and hear without being able to understand. When the audience is unsympathetic, they succeed only in causing boredom with what appears to be but confused and disordered noise. One should note that both Scotland and Wales, the former because of her affinity and intercourse, the latter, as it were, by grafting, try to imitate Ireland in music and strive in emulation. Ireland uses and delights in two instruments only, the harp, namely, and the tympanum. Now, the tympanum is not to be confused with the timpani, which is a kettle drum. One often played the tympanum with one's fingers or a plectrum, but on the crowd with a bow. So it was a stringed instrument, probably something like the harp, and you could either pluck it or you could use a bow. It's a little bit thinking like a fiddle or a violin. Oh man, that sky is so lush. Right, I'm going off with the camera. I'll see you later. Bye. By the time the episode is over, guaranteed the red sky will be gone. From the time of the first king of this people. Sorry, I missed it. Sorry, I do apologize. I missed a paragraph. Scotland uses 3, the harp, tympanum, and the crowd. Crowd. So, I should just say at this point that the Irish for a harp is crutch, C-R-O-I-T, or mendcrot. It's spelled M-E-N-D-C-R-O-T or C-R-O-T-T in the manuscripts. I just wonder whether crowd is a similar, it sounds phonetically similar, whether that's an anglicized version of crutch. But then he mentions harp separately, so who knows. They also use strings made of bronze and not from leather. In the opinion, however, of many, Scotland has by now not only caught up on Ireland, her instructor, but already far outdistances and excels her in musical skill. Therefore, people now look to that country as to the fountain of the art. Yet again, propagandizing against the Irish. How many kings reigned from Heremon to the coming of Patrick, and how the island was converted to the faith by him? From the time of the first king of this people, namely Heremon, until the coming of Patrick, 131 kings of the same people reigned in Ireland. And of course, so he's gone back now to Lebor Gabála, because the largest, the concluding and largest portion of the Lebor Gabála is the role of kings. And so he has returned here, apparently, to Lebor Gabála. Yeah, the answer, Movanwi, to your question is, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, it's just spelled crowd here, C-R-O-W-D, and there's nothing in the footnotes to indicate. So I would say that they're probably all related. And what type of instrument is that, and how do you pronounce that? C-R-W-T-H. I don't know how to pronounce that. 131 kings. Patrick, Britannic by birth, a man distinguished for his life and holiness, arrived in the island and, finding the people given to idolatry and deluded by various errors, was the first, by the aid of divine grace, to preach and plant there the Christian faith. And of course, there begins an entirely different type of colonization, the colonization by religious Rome and the church. He baptized the people, whole crowds at a time, and, the entire island, having been converted to the faith of Christ, chose Armagh as his see. Yes, and it was just like that. Patrick came and waved his Jedi mind trick hand and said, "You're all Christians now." And everybody went, "We're all Christians now." Yes, we completely abandoned every other belief that we had up till now. Not. He made this place a kind of metropolis and special seat for the primacy of the whole of Ireland. He also appointed bishops in suitable places, so that, having been called to share his responsibility, they should water what he had planted. The Lord, however, would grant the increase. How there were no archbishops in Ireland before the arrival of John Papiro, who established 4 pallia in Ireland. There were no archbishops in Ireland. Well, there's a footnote, so we'll quickly read what the footnote says. Hope everybody's okay. We'll be finishing up soon. Giraldus is in error here. Yes, as if that was the only time he was in error. Yes, yeah, just here, yeah. But the bishops just consecrated one another until John Papiro, legate of the Roman See, came here not many years ago. He established 4 pallia in Ireland. One he gave to Armagh, another to Dublin, a third to Cashel, and the 4th to Tuam in Connacht. As it happens, Giraldus, again writing at the end of the 12th century, was writing at a time when there had actually been great change. The 12th century is a time of major church reform, with the Synod of Rathbrassel. I think that was in 1111. And the Synod of Kells Mellifont, which I think, think about this, was that in 1152? And they were the ones that established these, he calls them pallia. They bishoprics, dioceses. The dioceses were established in the 12th century, weren't they? Saint Columba and Saint Bridget. Oh, sorry. Again, I skipped a bit. I do apologize. The Blessed Patrick died and slept in the Lord in the 120th year of his age, 458 years after the incarnation of the Lord. Excuse me. Oh, I nearly sneezed. And 1,800 years after the coming of the Hibernians. And so, 1,800 years after the coming of the Milesians. Yeah, that 480 years, that would put them around, what, 1100 AD, 1100 BC. And the annals put the Milesians' arrival at 1700 BC. How the three bodies of Patrick, Columba, and Bridget were in their own times found in Ulster in the city of Down and were translated. St. Columba and St. Bridget were contemporaries of St. Patrick. Their three bodies were buried in Ulster in the same city, namely Down, now known as Downpatrick. They were found there in our times, in the year, that is, that Lord John first came to Ireland, in a cave that had 3 sections. Sounds a bit like Newgrange, doesn't it? Patrick was lying in the middle, and the others were lying one on either side. John de Courcy, who was in command there, took charge when these 3 noble treasures were, through divine revelation, found and translated. And here we go. The bagpipe. Oh, yes, indeed. That's a possibility, yes. What years did his writings cover, Brendan? Well, he first visited Ireland in 1183, and he died in something like in the 1210s. He died in 1223. So his writings, I suppose, fall between those dates. So we're talking about the late 1100s to the early 1200s. The Irish are ignorant of the rudiments of the faith. Although since the time of Patrick and through so many years the faith has been founded in the island and has almost continuously thrived, it is nevertheless remarkable that this people even still remains so uninstructed in its rudiments. And this is coming from the same guy who told us that the entire island was converted by Patrick on the previous page. This is a filthy people wallowing in vice. And now he's pinning his colours to the mast again, putting us down again. Of all peoples, it is the least instructed in the rudiments of the faith. They do not yet pay tithes or first fruits or contract marriages. They do not avoid incest. They do not attend God's church with due reverence. Moreover, and this is surely a detestable thing, and contrary not only to the faith, but to any feeling of honour, men in many places in Ireland, I shall not say marry, but rather debauch the wives of their dead brothers. They abuse them in having such evil and incestuous relations with them. In this, wishing to imitate the ancients more eagerly in vice than in virtue, they follow the apparent teaching and not the true doctrine of the Old Testament. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter has a question. Did you dance a jig when you knew for sure that you discovered logboats? Yes. It was a bit confusing initially, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that in next week's live stream, but because it initially appeared that the first 2 boats I had found were both previously recorded, and then I found the third, and then National Monuments came out with a statement saying, no, in fact, numbers 1 and 3 are new discoveries. So yes, I did. I was delighted. It's a strange one. Again, lots of serendipity and synchronicity, and that's something we'll discuss in a future episode, and maybe we'll devote a small publication to it at some time in the future as well. But fascinating stuff, and continuing to get the attention of people around the world. And I think we'll finish up with this one. Because I can't stand any more propagandizing against my ancient Irish brethren. This one's called Their Vices and Treacheries. So he hasn't said enough yet, you know? It's like, now that I got the claws into the Irish, I'm going to really pull them to shreds. Moreover, above all other peoples, they always practice treachery. And this is, remember, in a country, and we know from the Seanachas Mór, what we would call the Brehon laws, which had a very complex and, shall we say, what's the word? Oh, beneficent legal system to make sure that everybody was looked after. So I think this is definitely straying into the realms of absolute propaganda. When they give their word to anyone, they do not keep it. Not true. They do not blush or fear, although I can't say for sure because I didn't live in the 12th century. They do not blush or fear to violate every day the bond of their pledge and oath given to others, although they are very keen that it should be observed with regard to themselves. When you have employed every safeguard and use every precaution for your own safety and security, both by means of oaths and hostages and friendships firmly cemented and all kinds of benefits conferred, then you must be especially on your guard, because then especially their malice seeks a chance. For they feel that because of your reliance on your safeguards, you are not on the watch. Then at last they resort to the arts of evil and their accustomed weapons of deceit, so that, taking an opportunity of your feeling of security, they may be able to injure you when you do not expect it. You must be more afraid of their wile than their war, their friendship than their fire, their honey than their hemlock, their shrewdness than their soldiery, their betrayals than their battle lines, their specious friendship than their enmity despised. For this is their principle: who asks of an enemy whether he employs guile or virtue? These are their characteristics. They are neither strong in war nor reliable in peace. And so what started out as a great retelling of the Lebor Gabála and the Book of Invasions turned into a sustained, an unceasing attack on the good character of the Irish people whom Giraldus encountered during his journey here. But remember that this is a guy who was a churchman in Wales who had come with other well-to-do Norman families to basically conquer Ireland and see if there was land to be taken here. And of course, his account in that regard is absolutely to be considered as tainted. And well, we've certainly seen a picture. There's much more, although it's not. Again, just to remind you what I've been reading from, and that is Gerald of Wales, The History and Topography of Ireland, Penguin Classics, and that is translated with an introduction by John F. O'Mara, and it only runs to, like, not including the footnotes, it only runs to 125 pages. It's short and sweet, but it's still it's a valuable document and oft-cited, as I said, by scholars. Not just in mythology, but in the history of the land, as being probably the only source other than the annals from that time that tell us anything about what life might have been like. And in fact, the annals don't even tell us that, because the annals are bare chronicles, terse and to the point chronicles of the lives and deaths of kings and ecclesiastical figures. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. I've enjoyed myself. Hopefully, the hay fever will become a thing of the past. Don't forget, as I say, I've begun work on monograph number 2 in the Mythical Ireland monograph series, and that's about Bowe, the goddess of the Boyne. I will probably make that pre-orderable on the website in the coming week or so. So keep an eye out on the Mythical Ireland social media channels on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, etc., where I'll put the link up where you can pre-order it. Don't forget also that Return to Segish signed copies. I still have lots of them here. The first of my books to be published in hardback. And again, all of the books that are dispatched from Mythical Ireland headquarters here in the Boyne Valley are signed by the author, and we can post worldwide. So if you're looking for a signed copy of any of the books, please, visit the website. If you want to make a one-off payment to support the Melon app, etc., for the running of the live streams, the address is paypal.me/Mythical Ireland. paypal.me/Mythical Ireland. So we'll be back, as I say, not just 100% confirmed on what we're doing next Monday. The plan is to have a live conversation episode with Dr. Niall Gregory, one of the foremost experts on Irish dugout boats. And I think that will be fascinating. He is an absolute mine of information, as I say, about the subject of the log boats. Has been to examine 2 of the 3 Boyne log boats, and is on top of everything else. He's a gentleman, and I believe that will be very interesting. Just keep an eye. If that's confirmed, I'll announce it tomorrow. I'll announce it tomorrow morning. And that will be a Zoom event. So the same story as with all the same story with all our live streams. It's a Zoom event, so you have to register. You have to pre-register. Now, participation is free, but you still have to pre-register. So I'll send that out tomorrow morning, hopefully. In the meantime, I hope you all have wherever you are in the world. For those watching in New Zealand and Australia, I hope you have a great day. For those of you in Ireland and Britain and this part of the world, I hope you have a very good evening. And all our friends in the United States and Canada and in South America, Daisy in Brazil and all of those, we say, I hope that the rest of the day is a good one for you. In the meantime, I will try to in the coming week do a live stream or 2 from the landscape. Now that the restrictions have been completely lifted, I can travel, and I would hope to get the time to get out into the landscape and visit some of those places we haven't seen in a while. So I hope you're able to join us for those. In the meantime, I'm Anthony Murphy. I'm away to get a whiskey, purely, as I say, for medicinal purposes. Thank you for attending and for watching. It's great to see all of you, every one of you. The best of health and the best of luck to all of you from Ireland. In the meantime, Ikawa, good night. Kolo sov, sound sleep. Only when you're going to sleep, though. Slán go fóill, bye for now. And most importantly, Tóg go bugé. Take it easy.